Hey guys, happy Memorial Day. I'm here sharing a Coke with my buddy Carlos here. Staff Sergeant Lazani. U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Lazani died. It's right here. He died April 2014 in Fort Hood, Texas. He was a victim of a shooting that left 3 soldiers dead and 16 others injured before the shooter killed himself. And to most of the world, that's how they know him. But I knew him as Carlos, as PFC Lasani or Lasane is what we used to call him. He and I were paratroopers in Fort Bragg. I met Carlos 22 years ago, back in 1995, early 1995, just after I'd gotten to Fort Bragg. You know, um, I was new on post, and I didn't know many people. My roommate happened to also be Puerto Rican, and recently after I got there, he took me over across the street, a couple barracks over, and introduced me to Carlos. He was friends with Carlos, and Carlos was one of those guys that just knew everybody. So from there, I met a whole bunch of other people through him. Um, you know, Sitting back and thinking about things, this guy right here had such a butterfly effect on my life. So many things that people have known me over the years for don't happen without this guy right here. Um, when I don't become a skydiver if it's not because of this guy. We used to hang out. We used to go out and hang out in his room. His room was like the hub for everybody to hang out in. And so we used to go and hang out in his room every weekend. And we were already paratroopers. We were already in the 82nd Airborne. We jumped out of airplanes already. But he was the one that found out about this skydiving club on post for soldiers. It was his idea for us to go. And due to scheduling conflicts, he never made it to the school. But my roommate and I did. So that doesn't happen without Carlos. It was essentially originally his idea. Um, the Star Wars. This guy loved Star Wars so much. Every weekend we watched Star Wars in his room. This is back before the days of the special editions or even the prequels. We're talking about the original movies, and every weekend either Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, or Return of the Jedi was playing in his room every single weekend. And it was because of Carlos that I started collecting. My roommate and Carlos would collect. Back in '95, they started. Kenner started putting out Star Wars figures again after years of not having any Star Wars merchandise on stores. So they started collecting it, and they had a list of figures that they had and figures that they needed, and him and my roommate were collecting, and I wasn't, but I was the only one with a car, so I was the one that would take them shopping. And I remember one weekend I was taking my roommate to I think flea market hunting it was, and we stopped by Carlos's room first, and they were checking off their list of what they needed and what they had, and so on and so on. Well, my roommate and I make our way to the flea market, and I walked into this one booth first, and as soon as I walk in, I see the Darth Vader figure. It was the Power of the Force 2 Darth Vader figure in the orange card with a long lightsaber. It was the first one that came out in '95. And I remember them both saying that they needed it. They both did. And I wasn't collecting Star Wars figures, but just because this is the way we kind of played with each other all the time, we were always kind of pranking each other. I walked up and I grabbed it. Like I said, I walked into the booth first, so I walked up and I grabbed it and I went to buy it. My roommate's like, "What are you doing? You don't even collect them." And I said, "Well, now I do." And I went and I popped that figure. And from there, started my collecting, my Star Wars collecting. Um, without that, and that starts my love of Star Wars, or my reigniting that love of Star Wars. And so from there, I start reading the books, and then I start following the prequels, and I start subscribing to magazines. Without Carlos reintroducing me to Star Wars, I don't join the 501st. Without the 501st, I don't meet the Heroes Alliance. Without the 501st, I don't get into costuming. I don't get into superhero costuming later on. I don't get into Ghostbusters costuming later on. So, so much of these extracurricular activities that people know me for, toy collecting, toy hunting, costuming, these charity groups, all this stuff, all of that doesn't happen without this guy right here. It's an incredible butterfly effect. Another movie that he loved was The Lion King. If Star Wars wasn't playing in his room, The Lion King was playing in his room. I want to go back to I want to go back to Star Wars. I just remember the story. Carlos worked in supply, and we had chem lights in the Army. You're probably familiar with them. They're about this long, a little plastic tube. You break them in half, you crack them, and there's a chemical inside that mixes and illuminates. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You've maybe seen it at clubs in the little bitty sizes or whatever. Well, because we were in parachute operations, we had these ones that were like 2.5 feet long. There's for special equipment, heavy drops, and that kind of stuff. And they're usually green or red. Well, Carlos being supply, he was able to get a hold of some and keep them. And we would go over to his barracks, and we would turn off all the lights in the hallway. We were 19 years old, we were kids, and we would break up the chem lights. And they were green and red, and we would have lightsaber fights in the hallways. Just stupid kids, man, having fun. So, yeah. Oh, we used to mess around a lot. Lion King, he loved the Lion King too. Like I said, if Star Wars wasn't playing, it was Lion King that was playing in his room. And man, he loved that movie, and he made us love it too. He made us love it, and I love that movie so much. And I introduced my own kids to that movie, and we've watched the crap out of that movie, and my kids love that movie. And my oldest daughter, she does this thing. In my house, you can get Simbad, and that's my daughter will put makeup on her thumb, and when you're not expecting it, she'll sneak up on you, and she'll rub her thumb across your forehead and just go Simba, and now you've got a smear of makeup on your forehead. And Carlos would have loved that. Carlos was a prankster. He was the guy that was always smiling. He was always laughing. He was always looking for a joke. And every time my daughter does that, I think Carlos is laughing at me. Yeah, Carlos was cool. We didn't get to spend a whole lot of time together, unfortunately. Like I said, we met in early '95. And we weren't in the same unit, so we usually just kind of hung out on weekends. We went clubbing every once in a while, but on early '98, January of '98, I went off to Sinai, Egypt, and I was there for 6, almost 7 months. And when I got back, he was leaving. He was being deployed. So we never saw each other again after that. And that was it. I never heard from Carlos again. 1998 was the last time we saw each other, or or spoke to each other. We were never, this was long, this was decades before Facebook and social media and all that kind of stuff. So we were never able to reconnect. So that was the last time we saw each other, and it wasn't until a couple years ago in 2014 when a mutual friend of ours, who I haven't stayed in touch with over the years, she called me. We'd all heard about the shooting in Fort Hood, and our friend Kim, she called me and told me, "Hey, did you hear about the shooting in Fort Hood?" "Yeah, I did." Well, Carlos was one of the guys that was shot and killed. That was the next thing I'd heard of him, in 20 years. And so it was sad that we were never able to, stay in touch or reconnect. But, our time together was short, but it was precious. A lot of stories to tell and share. But, it's, when you think about it, our time together wasn't that long, but when you think about, like I said earlier, the butterfly effect that this guy had on my life, so much of who I am today and what I've done over the last 20 years with my life doesn't happen without this guy. This guy had an incredible impact on my life, and it's an impact when you sit down and realize that, this, you don't think about that, and you take people for granted, and it's just, it's Army life is such, and in all military life, it's such that people come and go from your life every day. People come into your life, people leave your life every day. That is a fact of life in the military, and you learn not to give it another thought. That's just the way life is. And so, Carlos was just another one of, a long line of people that came in and out of life, army buddies. They come in, they're here one day, they're gone the next. And you don't think about it. And it's not until they're gone that you stop to think about them and you realize what kind of impact people have had in your life. Everybody you have ever met has molded or shaped who you are today. Who you are right now is a piece of clay that is constantly being reshaped and remolded by every single person you have interaction with. And likewise, you are helping to shape and mold the people that you touch on a daily basis. We're always changing, and the people that we interact with make us who we are. This guy was a big part of who I am. And, I didn't realize that until he was gone. I'm just lucky that he's close to home now. He was a couple of months away from retirement. His mom lives near where I live, and he was going to move down to this area in a few months, and it's unfortunate that things went down the way they did. Maybe we would have been able to reconnect, and we'll never know. But be a positive change for people. I'm all slurry and nasty here. Be a positive mold for those you touch. And while you're out there today, spending time with your family, enjoying your time off of work, and barbecuing or whatever it is, grilling out, whatever it is that you're doing today, take a couple of minutes to think about those we've lost in service. I'm one of the lucky ones. My wife is one of the lucky ones. We both got out of the military without a scratch. Yeah, well, we got aches and pains and stuff like that. Jumping out of airplanes pretty much messed my body up pretty bad, but, I'm up here and he's down there, so, I consider myself, my wife and I are, some of the lucky ones. Others were not. I'm sitting here in a field full of those who were not, and there's dozens of fields here in front of me and across the street, and just all these fields full of those comrades of ours that didn't make it out as lucky as we did. So today, while you're enjoying time with your family, take a couple of minutes to just think about these guys and what they've done for us. So I brought 2 of these, so I'm leaving one here with Carlos. And I went to Disney this weekend with my family. I spent the weekend at Disney. And while I was there, I got a couple of pins. I got a Darth Vader pin for Carlos because, you know, Star Wars. And I got him also. This was funny. It's the Simba symbol. This is the one that Rafiki does the thumb throw on. So I got him that too. So I'm gonna leave now before I'm a mess right now. I'm sure you don't want to see this. So guys, have a happy Memorial Day, and take a couple of minutes to think about these guys, men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice and the last full measure of devotion for all of us. Alright guys, talk to you soon. Bye.